You know, in all my cycles serving the Galactic Council as a diplomatic observer, I thought I had seen every possible way a species could mess up first contact protocols. Boy, was I wrong. The name is Vex Cathara, and I am what you might call a professional witness to stupidity. My species, the Morthak, have been documenting galactic politics for over 12,000 years. We pride ourselves on our neutrality, our keen observation skills, and our ability to predict exactly when things are about to go spectacularly wrong. Today was one of those days. The human delegation had arrived at Station Omega-7 3 rotations ago, and already the political atmosphere was thicker than a Belvarian swamp. Ambassador Elena Voss stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Chamber, her small frame dwarfed by the towering representatives from dozens of species. But here is the thing about humans that most of the galaxy still has not figured out. Size means absolutely nothing to them. So let me get this straight, Elena said, her voice carrying that particular human tone that I had learned to recognize as dangerous, like the calm before a stellar storm. You are telling me that Earth's application for full membership in the Galactic Council is being denied because we are too aggressive. High Chancellor Zor Velthon of the Kralaxian Empire leaned forward, his multiple eyes gleaming with what passed for amusement among his kind. The Kralaxians had been the dominant military force in this sector for centuries, and Zor Velthon was particularly fond of reminding everyone of that fact. Precisely, human. Your species has demonstrated an alarming propensity for violence. The recent incident with the Theta pirates alone. You mean when we stopped them from enslaving an entire colony world? Elena interrupted, raising one eyebrow in that expressive way humans do. How terribly aggressive of us. I made a note in my datapad. Human Diplomat displays sarcasm level 7.3. Kralaxian appears oblivious. The tension in the room was palpable. Representatives from 47 species watched this exchange with varying degrees of interest, concern, and in some cases, barely concealed glee. The Ythrak delegation was practically vibrating with excitement, their tentacles twitching in anticipation of what they hoped would be a spectacular diplomatic failure. Furthermore, Zor Velthon continued, apparently missing the warning signs that were obvious to anyone with half a brain, your species lacks the proper respect for established hierarchies. You seem to believe that all sapient beings are somehow equal. Elena blinked slowly. How absolutely shocking of us. Indeed it is, rumbled General Krex Morlax, the Brutalian representative whose species looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a bulldozer and then given it anger management issues. In civilized space, we understand that some species are naturally superior to others. It is the way of things. Now, here is where I should mention that I had spent the last several months studying human history and culture as part of my assignment. What I found there was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans had this peculiar habit of appearing reasonable right up until the moment they decided you had crossed a line you did not even know existed. Then they became something else entirely. Naturally superior, Elena repeated, her voice taking on that particular flat quality that made my secondary nervous system start sending alarm signals. Based on what criteria, exactly? Military strength, obviously, Krex Morlax snorted. Economic power, technological advancement. The Brutalian Empire has conquered 47 worlds. The Kralaxians, 62. What has humanity accomplished? You barely control your own solar system. Elena smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Well, that is certainly one way to measure success. High Chancellor Zor Velthon seemed to interpret this as submission. Fatal mistake. I am pleased you understand, human. Perhaps there is hope for your species yet. However, your application is still denied. The Council cannot risk admitting such an unstable element. Unstable element, Elena mused. Interesting choice of words. Tell me, High Chancellor, what do you know about human history? Enough, Zorvelthon waved a dismissive appendage. Primitive tribalism, constant warfare, technological development through conflict. Hardly impressive by galactic standards. I watched Elena's face carefully. There was something happening behind her eyes, a kind of calculation that reminded me of the predators from my homeworld just before they struck. You know what I find fascinating? Almost every species in this chamber has made the same assumption about humanity. Which is, asked Advisor Tim Kelpis, of the Ethereal Consortium, her melodious voice carrying what she probably thought was condescension, but came across more like the last words of someone about to stick their hand in a fire. That we are weak, because we have not conquered anyone. The chamber fell silent. Even the Ythrak stopped their excited twitching. Elena continued, her voice conversational, almost friendly. See, here is the thing. Everyone keeps talking about the 47 worlds the Brutalians conquered, or the 62 under Kralaxian control. Impressive numbers, certainly. But has anyone actually looked at how many worlds humanity could have conquered? Could have. Zorvelthon laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Human! Your species has barely achieved faster than light travel. Your ships are decades behind current technology. Your military is laughably small by galactic standards. Our military, Elena said, and now there was definitely something predatory in her smile, is exactly as large as we need it to be. General Krex Morlax snorted again. What could you possibly need to defend? One world? Your pathetic outer colonies? Oh, we are not defending anything, General. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I found myself leaning forward, my data stylus forgotten. I beg your pardon? Tim Kelpis's voice had lost its musical quality. We are not a defensive species, Elena explained patiently, like she was talking to a particularly slow child. That is your first mistake. Humans do not build armies to defend. We build armies to win. Win what, exactly? Zorvelthon demanded. Elena looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. Whatever war we decide to fight. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could hear the soft humming of the station's life support systems, the quiet whisper of recycled air. Somewhere in the distance, a maintenance drone beeped softly. Are you threatening the Galactic Council? Krex Morlax's voice was dangerously low. Elena laughed, a genuinely amused sound that somehow made everything worse. General, if I were threatening you, you would know it. No, I am simply trying to help you understand something that your intelligence services seem to have missed. Which is, humanity is not asking to join the Galactic Council because we need your protection or your approval. We are asking because we thought it might be more pleasant to be neighbors instead of conquerors. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Conquerors. Advisor Prex Salanthi of the Maritime Alliance finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. Ambassador Voss, surely you cannot be serious. Humanity lacks the military capacity for significant galactic expansion. Do we? Elena tilted her head slightly. Tell me, Advisor, how many ships do you think Earth has? According to our intelligence reports, approximately 2,000 vessels of various classes. Interesting. And how many of those are military vessels? Perhaps 300. Elena nodded thoughtfully. And where did your intelligence services get these numbers? From standard observation protocols, long-range scanning, trade route monitoring. Ah, Elena's smile widened. So you counted the ships you could see. I felt a chill run down my spinal ridges. Oh no. What are you implying? Zor-Velthon demanded. I am implying that your intelligence services are not very good at their jobs, Elena replied cheerfully. Would you like to know how many ships humanity actually has? Enlighten us, Krex Morlax growled. Elena reached into her diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small data crystal. She placed it on the central podium and activated the holographic projector. Numbers began scrolling across the display. Lots of numbers. Very large numbers. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations, gasps, and what I was fairly certain were several different species equivalents of profanity. Impossible, breathed Tim Kelpis. 57,000 vessels, Elena read from the display. 14,000 of which are frontline, military ships. The rest are support vessels, cargo haulers, and what we call conversion-capable civilian craft. That means we can turn them into weapons platforms in about 6 hours, if we need to. Zor-Velthon's multiple eyes were bulging. These numbers, they cannot be accurate. Oh, they are very accurate. In fact, they are slightly outdated. We commissioned another 800 ships last month. Where are they? Krex Morlax roared. Our sensors would have detected fleets of that magnitude. Elena looked genuinely puzzled. Detected them where? In your system, around your colonies. Why would we keep them there? That would be strategically unsound. The realization hit me like a meteor impact. I started typing frantically in my datapad, cross-referencing shipping manifests, unexplored system surveys, asteroid mining reports. They are not in human space at all, I said aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. Every eye in the chamber turned to me. Elena nodded approvingly. Very good, Observer Vexkthara. No, they are not in human space. They are in everyone else's space. The silence this time was absolute. You could have heard a single atom split. For the last 15 years, Elena continued conversationally, while you have all been so busy measuring your conquered worlds and comparing the sizes of your empires, humanity has been quietly building the largest fleet in galactic history. And we have been positioning that fleet very, very carefully. She manipulated the holographic display, and a three-dimensional map of the local galactic sector appeared. Red dots began appearing throughout the display. Thousands of them. Each red dot represents a human fleet element, Elena explained. As you can see, we have assets positioned within striking distance of every major world, trade route, and military installation in this sector of the galaxy. Advisor Prex Solanthi was staring at the display in horror. This is an act of war. No, Elena said calmly. This is preparation for war. There is a difference. You have been planning to invade us all along, Zor-Velthon accused. Elena sighed, the sound of someone dealing with particularly difficult children. High Chancellor, if we were planning to invade you, you would already be invaded. No, this is what humans call a deterrent. Insurance policy. A polite way of saying, please do not make us do something we will all regret. But why? Tim Kelpis whispered. Why build such a massive force, if not for conquest? Because, Elena said, her voice taking on a harder edge, we learned something from studying galactic history. We learned that in this part of the universe, peaceful species get enslaved, exploited, or exterminated. We decided that was not going to happen to us. So you built an invasion fleet instead, Krexmorlax snarled. We built a guarantee, Elena corrected. A promise that humanity would never be weak enough to be victimized. And here is the beautiful part. It worked perfectly. For 15 years, we have maintained peace through strength. No one has attacked Earth. No one has threatened our colonies. No one has tried to enslave our people. The system worked exactly as intended. Until now, I found myself saying. Elena turned to me with that predatory smile again. Very perceptive observer. Yes, until now. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. The assembled representatives began talking at once, their voices rising in panic and outrage. Silence! Zorvelthon's voice boomed across the chamber. Are you saying that humanity considers the Council's denial of membership to be an act of aggression? Not at all, Elena replied. I am saying that 3 days ago, humanity received intelligence that several Council members have been planning a preemptive action against our so-called growing threat. Apparently, some of you have decided that the existence of human military capability is itself grounds for military intervention. My blood went cold. I had heard rumors, whispers in the diplomatic corridors, but I had dismissed them as typical Council paranoia. That intelligence, Elena continued, was confirmed when General Krexmorlax sent a coded message to his fleet commanders 18 hours ago, instructing them to begin mobilization procedures. Krexmorlax went very still. How do you know about that transmission? Elena's smile was absolutely arctic now. General, we have been monitoring all military communications in this sector for over a decade. Did you really think we would build the largest fleet in galactic history, and then just hope no one would notice? The chamber exploded into shouting again. Accusations flew between species. Old alliances and rivalries surfaced as representatives began pointing fingers at each other. Elena waited for the noise to die down before continuing. So here we are, she said. Humanity applied for Council membership in good faith, hoping to resolve our differences through diplomacy. Instead, we have been branded as too aggressive by species that have conquered dozens of worlds, and now we discover that some of you are planning military action against us. What do you intend to do about it? Zorvelthon asked, his voice barely controlled. Elena looked around the chamber one more time, her gaze lingering on each delegation. Well, High Chancellor, that depends entirely on you. Meaning? Meaning that as of 6 hours ago, the human government declared what we call a active defense posture. Our fleets have been given authorization to engage any military vessel that approaches within 10 light-years of human space or shows hostile intent toward human interests. You cannot be serious, breathed Advisor Prex Solanthe. Deadly serious, Elena confirmed. Furthermore, any species that participates in hostile action against humanity will find their trade routes disrupted, their military installations targeted, and their homeworlds. Well, let us just say they will discover exactly how creative humans can be when we set our minds to it. The chamber had gone completely silent again. I could practically feel the weight of 57,000 human warships pressing down on everyone present. This is madness, Tim Kelpis whispered. You would start a galactic war over membership in the Council? Elena shook her head sadly. Advisor, you still do not understand. We are not starting anything, but if you insist on finishing what you have already started. She shrugged eloquently. Well, humans have never been ones to back down from a fight. General Krexmorlax stood slowly, his massive frame towering over the human ambassador. Do you have any idea what you are proposing? The Brutalian Empire alone has military forces numbering in the millions. Our ships are proven in battle. Our warriors tested by countless campaigns. Elena looked up at him without flinching. General, let me ask you something. In all those campaigns, all those conquests, have you ever fought an enemy that wanted to fight back? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I beg your pardon? Have you ever faced an opponent that was not trying to defend something? Not trying to protect their families, their homes, their worlds? Have you ever fought an enemy whose only goal was to destroy you? Krex Morlax's expression shifted slightly. What are you saying? I am saying that every war the Brutalian Empire has fought has been against people who wanted to survive, people who had something to lose, people who would eventually surrender if the cost became too high. Elena's voice took on a cold, factual tone. Humans are different, General. When we fight to win. Period. We do not surrender. We do not negotiate. We do not stop until our enemies are completely and utterly defeated. It is just how we are built. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop another few degrees. I found myself unconsciously checking the environmental controls. You speak of human nature as if it were some kind of weapon, Zorvelton said slowly. High Chancellor, Elena replied. Human nature is the most terrifying weapon in the known galaxy. We are the only species that has ever looked at the concept of mutually assured destruction and thought, yes, that sounds reasonable. The implications of that statement sank in slowly. Mutually assured destruction. The complete annihilation of both sides in a conflict. Most species found the concept literally unthinkable. The idea that a rational being would choose total destruction rather than accept defeat went against every survival instinct in the known galaxy. Except, apparently, for humans. Surely, Advisor Prex Solanthe said carefully, your government would not authorize such extreme measures over a diplomatic dispute. Elena tilted her head slightly, considering the question. Advisor, do you know what happened the last time? Someone threatened to destroy humanity. No. Neither do we, Elena said cheerfully, because it has never happened. See, most species that get to the point where they could pose an existential threat to humanity have already figured out that it would be a spectacularly bad idea. Until now, I muttered again. Elena pointed at me approvingly. Exactly, until now. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. You are about to make galactic history. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the chamber. 57,000 human warships positioned throughout the sector. Fleets that had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. A species that apparently viewed total mutual annihilation as a perfectly reasonable military strategy. And at the center of it all, one small human woman who was delivering what amounted to the most polite ultimatum in galactic history. High Chancellor Zorvelton cleared his throat. Ambassador Voss, perhaps we should take a recess to consider these revelations. Of course, Elena said graciously. Take all the time you need. Just keep in mind that my government is monitoring this situation very closely. Any hostile action, any aggressive fleet movements, any attempt to mobilize forces against human interests will be interpreted as an act of war. And then what? Krex Morlax demanded. Elena smiled that terrifying human smile one more time. And then, General, you will discover exactly why humanity has never needed to conquer anyone to be the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The session was officially adjourned, but nobody moved. They just sat there, staring at the holographic display with its thousands of red dots representing human military assets. Assets that had been invisible, undetected, perfectly positioned for over a decade. As the representatives finally began filing out of the chamber, I heard fragments of conversation in dozens of languages. Fear, confusion, desperate calculations of military strength and political alliances. The entire balance of power in the sector had shifted in the space of a single diplomatic session. But what struck me most was not the fear in their voices, or the panic in their movements. It was the look on Elena's face as she gathered her materials. She did not look angry, or triumphant, or even particularly concerned. She looked tired, and maybe just a little bit sad, like someone who had just been forced to reveal a secret she had hoped never to use. They threatened Earth's diplomat, not realizing humanity had already declared war. Part 2. The emergency session reconvened exactly 4 hours later, and let me tell you, those 4 hours had been the most chaotic in Station Omega-7's recorded history. I had spent most of that time frantically updating my reports while monitoring emergency communications between various species fleets. The panic was spreading faster than a plasma fire in a hydrogen storage facility. Ambassador Elena Voss returned to the chamber looking exactly as composed as when she had left. Meanwhile, every other representative looked like they had aged several years in the span of an afternoon. High Chancellor Zor Velthon's multiple eyes were bloodshot. General Krex Morlax kept checking his personal communicator every 30 seconds. And Advisor Tim Kelpis appeared to be experiencing what humans might call a nervous breakdown. I trust everyone has had sufficient time to consult with their respective governments? Elena asked pleasantly, settling into her chair like she was attending a garden party instead of potentially triggering the largest military conflict in galactic history. Sufficient time? Krex Morlax exploded. Do you have any idea what you have unleashed? Half the fleets in the sector are mobilizing. Trade routes are shutting down. The Vorthan Republic is threatening to close their borders. Elena nodded sympathetically. Yes, we have been monitoring the situation. Quite a lot of military chatter, actually. Some very interesting tactical discussions. The blood drained from Krex Morlax's face, or at least shifted to a paler shade of purple. You are still intercepting our communications? General, Elena said with infinite patience. We have been intercepting everyone's communications for 15 years. How did you think we knew about your mobilization orders? Lucky guess. Advisor Prex Solanthi leaned forward desperately. Ambassador, surely there must be some way to resolve this situation peacefully. War benefits no one. I completely agree, Elena replied. That is why humanity has spent the last decade and a half trying to avoid one. Unfortunately, it takes two parties to maintain peace, and it only takes one to start a war. Then what do you propose? Zor Velthon demanded. Elena consulted her datapad with the casual air of someone reviewing lunch options. Well, that rather depends on what you all have decided. Have you chosen diplomacy? Or shall we proceed with the alternative? The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of environmental systems. I could practically hear the calculations running through dozens of alien minds. Military strength versus economic consequences. Fleet positions versus political alliances. The cost of war versus the price of peace. Finally, Advisor Tim Kelpis spoke up, her melodious voice strained. The Ethereal Consortium has reconsidered its position regarding humanity's membership application. How lovely, Elena said. And what is your new position? We believe that humanity would make a valuable addition to the Galactic Council. Elena made a note on her datapad. Excellent. Anyone else? One by one, the representatives began speaking up. The Maritime Alliance, the Crystalline Federation, the Merchant Guilds, even the notoriously stubborn Asteroid Miners Union. Each announced their support for human membership with varying degrees of enthusiasm and barely concealed terror. But 3 delegations remained conspicuously silent. Elena waited patiently until it became clear no one else was going to speak. Then she looked directly at High Chancellor Zor Velthon. High Chancellor? The Kralaxian Empire has been unusually quiet. Zor Velthon's multiple eyes darted around the chamber before settling on Elena. The Kralaxian Empire requires certain assurances. What kind of assurances? That humanity will not use its military capabilities to interfere with established territorial boundaries? Elena tilted her head thoughtfully. You mean the territories you conquered through military force? Legally recognized territorial claims, Zor Velthon corrected stiffly. Ah! Elena made another note. And these assurances would be binding how, exactly? Through formal treaty obligations, naturally. Elena nodded slowly. I see. So you want humanity to promise not to use military force to change existing territorial boundaries, while you reserve the right to continue expanding through conquest. Do I have that correct? When she put it like that, it sounded exactly as ridiculous as it was. Zor Velthon's expression shifted uncomfortably. The Kralaxian Empire has legitimate security concerns. Oh, I am sure you do, Elena agreed. Just like the legitimate security concerns of all those species you conquered over the centuries. Tell me, High Chancellor, do you remember the Altarian Collective? Every being in the chamber went very still. The Altarian Collective had been a peaceful trading federation that controlled several key hyperspace routes. Past tense being the operative phrase. The Altarians were absorbed into the Kralaxian Empire through legal diplomatic processes, Zor Velthon said carefully. Diplomatic processes, Elena repeated. Is that what you call blockading their trade routes until they faced economic collapse and then offering them protection in exchange for political submission? That is a gross oversimplification. Is it? Elena pulled up another holographic display. Because our intelligence suggests a very different story, should I share the communications intercepts from that period? The ones where your military commanders discuss the best way to make the blockade look like a pirate problem? Zor Velthon went completely silent. Around the chamber, other representatives were staring at the Kralaxian delegation with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Apparently, not everyone had been aware of the true details behind the Altarian absorption. The point is, Elena continued, humanity finds itself in the awkward position of being asked to respect territorial boundaries that were established through exactly the kind of aggressive expansion we are supposedly too dangerous to engage in ourselves. What are you suggesting? Prex Solanthe asked nervously. I am suggesting that if the Galactic Council wants humanity to respect certain rules, then perhaps those rules should apply to everyone equally. General Krex Morlax stood up abruptly. The Brutalian Empire will never accept restrictions on our sovereign right to expand. Elena looked at him with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. General, out of professional interest, how many wars has the Brutalian Empire fought in the last century? 47 successful campaigns, Krex Morlax replied proudly. And how many of those campaigns were against opponents with equivalent military technology? Krex Morlax paused. Equivalent technology is irrelevant. Victory is what matters. So, none of them, Elena translated. You have spent a century conquering species that could not effectively fight back, and now you are concerned about your sovereign right to continue doing so. We have built the strongest military in the sector through honorable conquest. Elena laughed, a sound that made everyone in the chamber flinch. General, there is nothing honorable about beating up civilizations that never had a chance against you. That is not conquest. It is bullying on a galactic scale. How dare you? How dare I what? Point out that the mighty Brutalian Empire has never actually fought a fair fight? That your entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority against primitive opponents? Krex Morlax's face was turning an alarming shade of red-purple. You think humanity could stand against the Brutalian war machine? I think, Elena said quietly, that humanity could end the Brutalian war machine in about 6 hours if we decided to. But that would be wasteful, and we try not to waste things. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud, but what made it truly terrifying was the casual way Elena delivered it, like she was discussing weather patterns instead of the potential annihilation of an entire stellar empire. 6 hours, Zorvelthon whispered. Well, maybe 8, if they put up more of a fight than expected. But I doubt it. Most bullies fold pretty quickly when someone finally punches back. I found myself checking my chronometer involuntarily. 6 hours. Could humanity really cripple the Brutalian Empire in 6 hours? Given what I had learned about human military capabilities over the last day, I was beginning to think they could do it in half that time. This is madness, Team Kelpis breathed. You cannot simply threaten entire civilizations. Advisor, Elena replied patiently, I am not threatening anyone. I am explaining reality. The reality is that humanity has the military capacity to defeat any single species in this sector, probably any combination of 2 or 3 species, and possibly everyone in this room working together if we really put our minds to it. Then why have you not conquered us already? Zorvelthon demanded. Elena looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Why would we want to? Conquest is expensive, time-consuming, and frankly rather boring. We have better things to do with our time. Such as? Art, music, literature, scientific research, exploration, philosophy. Elena shrugged. Things that actually matter. Building something instead of just taking what someone else built. The concept seemed to be genuinely foreign to most of the representatives present. The idea of having overwhelming military power and choosing not to use it for territorial expansion was apparently beyond their comprehension. But if you do not conquer, how do you grow stronger? Krex Morlax asked, sounding honestly confused. We learn things, Elena said simply. We discover new technologies, new ideas, new ways of thinking. We trade with other species. We collaborate on scientific projects. We explore unknown regions of space. Conquest just gets you more of what you already have. Learning gets you things you never imagined possible. And when someone threatens what you have built, Zorvelthon pressed. Elena's expression hardened slightly. Then we remind them why that was a mistake. Through military action. Through whatever action is necessary, Elena corrected. Military force is a tool, High Chancellor. Like any tool, it should be used appropriately and sparingly. But when someone decides to threaten everything you have worked to build, everything you care about. She paused. Well, then appropriate use might involve turning their entire civilization into a cautionary tale for future generations. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could see representatives doing mental calculations, trying to figure out whether their species fell into the future cautionary tale category. However, Elena continued cheerfully, we much prefer not to reach that point. Which brings us back to the original question, diplomacy or war? Advisor Prex Salanthe cleared her throat nervously. Ambassador, what exactly would humanity require in exchange for peaceful coexistence? Nothing unreasonable, Elena replied. Full membership in the Galactic Council, with all associated rights and privileges. Recognition of human territorial claims in our current sphere of influence. And a mutual non-aggression pact with all Council members. That seems manageable, Prex Salanthe said carefully. Oh, and one more thing, Elena added casually. We want the Altarian Collective restored to independence. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Zor-Velthon shot to his feet, all his eyes blazing with outrage. Absolutely not! The Altarian territories are legally part of the Kralaxian Empire? Were, Elena corrected. They were legally part of your empire. But that legal status was obtained through what humans would call extortion and coercion. We do not recognize territorial claims based on economic warfare. You cannot simply void centuries of established law. Elena consulted her datapad again. Actually, we can. See, one of the advantages of having the largest fleet in galactic history is that we get to decide which laws we recognize and which ones we do not. This is piracy, Krex Morlax roared. General, this is justice. There is a difference, although I understand why you might find the concept confusing. Zor-Velthon was practically vibrating with rage. The Kralaxian Empire will never agree to such terms. That is certainly your choice, Elena said calmly, but you should understand the consequences of that decision. Which are? Elena activated the holographic display again, but this time it showed a different image. Instead of the red dots representing human fleet positions, it showed the major Kralaxian military installations, trade routes, and population centers. Each one was marked with a small blue targeting reticle. In the event that diplomacy fails, Elena explained conversationally, humanity has prepared what we call Operation Clean Slate. Every major Kralaxian military installation will be simultaneously neutralized. All hyperspace routes into Kralaxian territory will be blockaded. Economic and communication networks will be disrupted. And then we will broadcast a simple message to every world in your empire. What message? Zor-Velthon whispered. That the Kralaxian government no longer exists, that all territorial claims are void, and that any world that wishes to declare independence has humanity's full support in doing so. The implications hit like a shockwave. Not conquest, but dissolution. Not absorption, but liberation. The Kralaxian Empire would not be defeated in battle. It would simply cease to exist as its member worlds chose freedom over imperial control. You would destroy everything we have built, Zor-Velthon said numbly. High Chancellor, we would set free everything you have stolen, Elena replied. There is a difference. Around the chamber, I could see other representatives making their own calculations. If humanity was willing to dismantle the Kralaxian Empire to restore the Altarian Collective, what would they do to species that had committed similar acts of legal conquest? The same principle applies to everyone, Elena said, as if reading their thoughts. Any territorial claims obtained through economic coercion, military intimidation, or outright conquest after, let us say, after first contact with humanity, will not be recognized. Affected populations will be given the option of independence or voluntary association. That would destabilize half the galaxy Tim Kelpis protested. Advisor, half the galaxy is already destabilized. It has been held together by force and fear for centuries. We are simply offering an alternative. Voluntary cooperation instead of imposed dominance. And if species refuse to cooperate? Prex Solanthe asked. Elena shrugged. Then they become irrelevant. We trade with species that want to trade. We collaborate with species that want to collaborate. We protect species that need protection. And we ignore species that prefer isolation. And those that choose aggression? Elena's smile returned, sharp and cold. Those become object lessons for the others. The chamber fell silent again. The choice was becoming clear. Accept humanity's terms and join a new galactic order based on voluntary cooperation. Or reject those terms and face the consequences of opposing the most powerful military force in known space. One by one, the delegations began signaling their acceptance. The Maritime Alliance, the Ethereal Consortium, the Merchant Guilds. Even some of the smaller empires that had been built on conquest seemed to recognize the writing on the wall. But 3 delegations still held out. The Kralaxians, the Brutalians, and, surprisingly, the Ythrak hegemony. Elena waited patiently until it became clear no one else was going to speak. Then she looked at the 3 remaining holdouts with something that might have been pity. Final call, gentlemen. Diplomacy or war? Representative Slith Yex of the Ythrak hegemony finally spoke, his tentacles writhing with agitation. The Ythrak demand to know humanity's true intentions. This cannot be about justice or freedom. What do you really want? Elena considered the question seriously. You know what, Representative? That is actually a fair question. What humanity really wants is very simple. She stood up and walked to the center of the chamber, looking around at all the assembled delegates. We want to be left alone to build the kind of civilization we choose to build. We want to explore the galaxy and learn new things and meet new species without constantly worrying about whether someone is going to try to conquer us or destroy us. We want our children to inherit a universe where intelligence and creativity matter more than military strength and territorial control. She paused, her expression growing more serious. But mostly, we want to never again have to explain to a room full of alleged adults why bullying weaker species is wrong. We want to live in a galaxy where that fact is so obvious, so universally accepted, that conversations like this one never need to happen. Elena looked directly at each of the holdout delegates in turn. So, that is our offer. Join us in building something better than what currently exists, or continue as you are and accept the consequences of that choice. But understand that those consequences will be permanent. This is not a negotiation that can be revisited later. This is not a diplomatic process that can be drawn out over years or decades. This is a one-time offer with a very short expiration date. How short? Krex Morlax demanded. Elena checked her chronometer. About 30 minutes ago. The temperature in the chamber plummeted. Around the room, representatives were frantically checking their own communication devices, trying to contact their fleets, their governments, their military commanders. You see, Elena continued conversationally, while we have been having this lovely discussion, human fleets have been moving into final positions. Operation Clean Slate is now fully operational and awaiting final authorization from Earth Command. You planned this, Zorvelthon breathed. This entire diplomatic session was a charade. Not a charade, Elena corrected. A courtesy. We could have simply acted without explanation. But we thought it would be more civilized to explain our reasoning first. Call it professional courtesy among diplomats. How long do we have? Slithyex asked quietly. Elena consulted her datapad one more time. Earth Command is expecting my final report in approximately 6 minutes. At that point, they will either receive confirmation that a diplomatic solution has been reached, or they will receive authorization to proceed with military operations. The panic was immediate and absolute. Representatives were shouting into communicators, trying desperately to contact their governments and military commanders. But of course, their communications were being intercepted and monitored by human intelligence services. Earth Command would know about any hostile fleet movements before the orders were even transmitted. "This is blackmail," Krex Morlax snarled. "General, this is consequences," Elena replied calmly. "For decades, you and your allies have used the threat of military force to intimidate weaker species into submission. Now, someone stronger than you is explaining the new rules. If you find the experience unpleasant, perhaps you should consider how your previous victims felt." 4 minutes. High Chancellor Zorvelthon looked around the chamber desperately, seeking support from the other delegates. But the species that had already accepted humanity's terms were watching the holdouts, with expressions that ranged from nervous anticipation to barely concealed schadenfreude. 3 minutes. "The Kralaxian Empire." Zorvelthon began, then stopped. His shoulders sagged in defeat. "The Kralaxian Empire accepts humanity's terms." Elena made a note on her datapad. "Excellent. General Krex Morlax?" The Brutalian general's face had gone through several color changes before settling on a sickly yellow-green. "The Brutalian Empire. We require time to consult with our leadership." "General, you have 2 minutes to make a decision that will determine whether your empire continues to exist. I suggest you decide quickly." 1 minute. "Fine," Krex Morlax roared. "The Brutalian Empire accepts your terms." Elena smiled brightly. "Wonderful, Representative Slithyex." The Ythrak delegate looked around the chamber one more time, his tentacles writhing in what I had learned was their species' expression of extreme agitation. "The Ythrak hegemony accepts." Elena activated her communicator. "Earth Command, this is Ambassador Voss. Diplomatic solution achieved. Operation Clean Slate is to remain on standby, but not execute. Repeat, diplomatic solution achieved." The relief in the chamber was palpable. Representatives slumped in their chairs, wiped sweat from various appendages, and tried to process what had just happened. "Congratulations, everyone," Elena said cheerfully. "Welcome to the new Galactic Order. I think you are going to like it much better than the old one." As the session finally adjourned and delegates began filing out of the chamber, I found myself alone with Elena for a moment. She was gathering her materials with the same calm efficiency she had displayed throughout the entire crisis. "Ambassador," I said quietly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, Observer." "Would you really have done it? Operation Clean Slate?" Elena paused in her packing and looked at me with those strange human eyes. For a moment, I saw something there that made my secondary nervous system activate again. Something cold and absolutely certain. "Observer Vex Cathara," she said quietly. "Humanity spent the last 15 years preparing for this moment. Do you really think we would have gone to all that trouble just to bluff?" I thought about the 57,000 human warships positioned throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been hidden in plain sight for over a decade. A species that viewed mutually assured destruction as a reasonable military strategy. "No," I said finally. "I do not think you were bluffing at all." Elena nodded approvingly. "Then you understand humans better than most. We do not make threats we are not prepared to carry out. We do not start fights we are not prepared to finish, and we do not offer peace to those who prefer war." She finished packing and headed toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. "Observer, you might want to update your files on human psychology. We are not actually as aggressive as everyone seems to think. We just have very firm opinions about what constitutes acceptable behavior. And what happens to species that disagree with those opinions?" Elena's smile was absolutely terrifying. "They become very quiet, very quickly." As she left the chamber, I sat alone with my datapad and tried to process everything that had just happened. In the space of a single day, humanity had revealed the largest military force in galactic history, dismantled the existing power structure, and established themselves as the dominant species in the sector. And they had done it all while claiming they just wanted to be left alone. I made a final note in my report. Recommendation: do not threaten humanity. Under any circumstances. Ever. Because if there was one thing I had learned from observing this diplomatic disaster, it was that humans were absolutely telling the truth about one thing. They really did prefer to build rather than conquer. But when someone forced them to choose between the two, they were very, very good at making the choice quickly and permanently. The galaxy had just learned that lesson the hard way.